All right, Mark chapter 10. Last week we had our first marriage building banquet, which I hope was a blessing to those of you who were able to attend. It was a good night, in my opinion, looking at it from the pastoral side of things. It was full of good stuff for our marriages, which is critically important for the health of our families, for the health of our church, for the health of our country. Marriage is, in my opinion, second to your spiritual condition, the priority for your life. If your marriage is not doing well, your family will not do well. If your family is not doing well, then from there everything else doesn't work out so well. So marriage is a priority for my ministry. That's why I speak on it as often as I do. Marriage is something that requires a lot of work. Marriage is something that needs to be built, and it needs to be maintained over the lifetime of its union. Marriage, I think too many people think that the work goes into getting married. The work people think probably goes into that dating relationship, courting, dating, whatever you want to call it, where we get to know each other and are we compatible? Is this God's will if you're spiritually minded? And so let's work towards getting married. And then when we get married, well, then naturally it's just going to be easy because we've gotten married and now everything fits into place. I know for those of you who have been married for more than 30 days, you know that's not true. But I think across culture, that's kind of the mindset. And don't forget, typically we get married at a younger age. When we're younger, typically, generally speaking, we lack some of the wisdom and maturity that comes with age and experience. So a lot of us, myself included, I was 20, my wife was 20, we had a lot to learn in life. And so when you get married, that hastens your learning process. But marriage is something that has to be built, not bought. It's something that has to be constructed, not contracted out. You've got to put hard work in. There's no way around that. I remember hearing, and I think I may have told you this, 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I was involved with a wedding ceremony. I had some role in it, and I was working that wedding with some other pastors, preachers, and I was sitting at the rehearsal dinner next to one of the guys, and he was an old-timer. He had all the answers for me, and he said this statement that I remember in my head thinking, okay, all right, here we go. He claimed after, 400 years of marriage, that they never had an argument. Never had a problem in my marriage, brother. I mean, it's been perfect. And I thought to myself, liar, okay. Unless you're perfect, pal, then you may not have had an argument, but she probably considered your speech an argument many times. Every marriage is going to have its problems. I actually recall getting married in my ignorance saying, you know what, I'm going to have the best marriage ever with my wife. We're not going to have an argument. We're not going to have a problem. I don't think that lasted very long. We realized two human beings living together results in problems, and so you have to work on a marriage. It just takes a lot of work. There's no way around that. Building a home requires building a marriage. Solomon told his son in Proverbs chapter 24 to build thine house. He told his son also this proverb in chapter 14. He said, every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. Solomon was in no way suggesting that women should get, the concrete and the rock and build the house for the family. He was certainly referring to that home, not the house. And he said women, mothers, husbands, fathers need to build that house, not break it down. It takes a lot of willingness to build a marriage, to build a home. It takes a lot of wisdom. Proverbs 24:3, through wisdom a house is builded. In the construction side of things, if you're actually building a literal house, you've got to know what you're doing. You have to have some knowledge, some wisdom, some understanding about structures, about the different things that go into a house, or it will come crumbling down. Or there will be massive leaks, or there'll be massive structural problems. Well, the same is true for building a home. Building a literal house, building a home, you've got to have wisdom, you've got to know what you're doing. And so, in the spirit of last weekend's banquet theme, I'd like to look at building a marriage this evening, constructing a couple. We could talk about a bazillion different elements, but I just want to mention some that I think are essential. And number one, you're going to have a foundation. Anyone with any type of experience or knowledge about construction knows that the most important element of a structure is the foundation. You've got to start with a sound foundation. Last week at the banquet, Gary and Jan showed us some pictures, for those of you who were here, of some skyscrapers or some apartment complexes that were multi-storied, and they were leaning over. And the reason they were leaning over is because during earthquakes, the foundation was not sufficiently built to handle that. In the good times, it was easy to build that, but they didn't build it properly in light of the bad times. When the storms would come, that building was not sufficient. Some shortcuts were taken, and Gary talked about that, and unfortunately, people got hurt. I don't know all that has gone into the building of the Freedom Tower, but I know this, that the Twin Towers, which stood in that place, their foundation rested 70 feet below ground where there was a bedrock. And so that tower sat on that. And I imagine they've done the same thing. We saw last time 40 or 50 feet of concrete below ground, let alone above ground, for the now Freedom Tower in New York City. The foundation is so important. Jesus, the Creator, Jesus, the carpenter, in Matthew chapter 7, he taught a lesson, and he talked about what we now do in the kids' song. He talked about a wise man and a foolish man. And he talked about how a wise man built his house upon a what? A wise man built his house upon a rock. And then we get to the foolish man. A foolish man built his house upon the sand, right? That's the foundation for these two individuals. Keep that in mind as we look at what I believe the commitment needs to be in our marriages. Mark chapter 10, verse number 2. And the Pharisees came to him, Jesus, and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? That's a reference to divorce. Tempting him, verse 3. And he answered and said unto them, what did Moses command you? And they said, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away. And Jesus answered and said unto them, yeah, he did, but he did it for the hardness of your heart. He wrote you this precept. But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. That's the leave, cleave, weave principle. So then they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Isn't it interesting? The Pharisees came to tempt Jesus, to try to find him wrestling with his words, getting tangled up with his words. And they said, can we divorce our wives? They're thinking about getting out of marriage. And Jesus says, what did Moses say? And they said, well, Moses allows for it. And Jesus said, you're right, he did. There is a provision for it. It's a specific provision. At this point, that's irrelevant. He said, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Now, why did he say that? Why did he say, in the beginning, God made them male and female? Was he setting the tone for the first marriage and how God said you're going to be one flesh? Or was he trying to say to them, listen, God didn't make it male and many females to choose from? That if one female didn't work, you can go to the next one. No, in the beginning, when God started humanity, he said one male, one female, now make it work, because you don't have any other options. That's why God did not create multiple men and multiple women. He said, here's one male, one female, you got to make it work. Male, you're going to leave father and mother, and you're going to cleave unto her. And you two will be one flesh. And then the Bible tells us that God added some things in the beginning marriage that we don't have the luxury of reading in Genesis, but God said, what I have joined together, let nobody put asunder. That is what God's original intent is. That is what God's still his present intent is. His intent is one man, one woman come together for a lifetime. And nobody breaks that marriage. What is that? That is ultimate commitment. Ultimate commitment. Marriage absolutely needs such a commitment for it to work. Now, I said that Jesus talked about building on a rock. If you're wise, if you're foolish, building on the sand. Can you build a structure on sand? Yeah, you can build a structure on sand. It can look good. It can stand up very well. Why do we have to build it on a rock then? Because Jesus said, when the rains descend and the floods increase and the wind blows, that's why you build it on a rock. You see, you can start a marriage when times are good, and most people do. No one gets married angry at each other. No one gets married in a stressed relationship. No one gets married in a contentious relationship. And if they do, it's a big mistake. Most people get married, Twitter-pated, happy. They're just convinced the rest of their lives they'll be happy and there won't be any problems. Most of us don't take our commitment at the altar that seriously. We follow through the words. We say them because at the time it's very easy. It's very easy to say in sickness and health, rich or poor, all these things till death do us part. That's very easy for us to say when we're looking to the eyes of somebody who's treating us very well. But we say those things so that we get through the tough times, not the easy times. Commitment is not necessary in the easy times. Building your house on a rock is not so it can stand when the sun is shining and the skies are blue. You build your house on a rock so that when, not if, but when the rains descend, when the floods grow, and when the wind blows, that's when you can stand the difficulties. In Asia, these towers that fell, they were fine until an earthquake came. They did not build it to last the difficulties. Marriage will not last the difficulties if there is not absolute commitment to that marriage. I tell couples, you know this, divorce is not a word you can use in your vocabulary. It cannot be an option. You say, why? Why are you so dogmatic on that? If it's an option, it becomes a temptation. If it's a temptation, it can be a reality very easily. It cannot be an option. Commitment to someone for a lifetime is essentially till death do us part. No matter what happens outside of our home, till death do us part. No matter what happens inside our home, till death do us part. No matter what happens to your career or to your career, till death do us part. No matter what happens to your health or my health, till death do us part. No matter what happens to your, you ready? To your mind, till death do us part. Well, when I married him, he wasn't like this. Something changed. Yeah, a lot of things change in life. You know, when I married her, she wasn't like this. Yeah, you gave her 4 kids. She went through a lot. Hormones just make that woman different a little bit. Stress at home makes that woman different a little bit. Well, he wasn't like this 20 years ago. He's gone through what we call a midlife crisis. Till death do us part, no matter what. Well, they got in an accident and this changed. I'm just not attracted to them anymore. What did you say at the altar? You said that for the tough times, not for the good times. You see how important it is to build a marriage? If you build a marriage and don't have total commitment to somebody, it will not last. And if it does, it will be unfulfilling and miserable. I appreciate Pastor Nugent's when he was involved with us premaritally counseling. He would ask us, are you willing to publicly say you will not seek a divorce in the court of law? Now, that's a tough question to ask. But that's how important your commitment must be. Pastors always taught us, when you get married, you're entering a room with no exits. If you don't have that mindset, when the times get tough, what are you looking for? The exit. The exit. Secondly, we need to have walls in our marriage. If we're going to build a house, you've got to have walls. You can lay a foundation, but beyond that, if you don't put walls up, is it going to be a house? I suppose you could slap a pole in the middle and put a little umbrella and say, there, we've got a structure, but it's not a home. It's certainly not a home that will keep you safe from unwanted creatures, from unwanted people, and from other elements that you're living in. You say, what are walls? Walls in a marriage are marital boundaries, and they are necessary for seeking a healthy marriage. Now, if you're a selfish spouse, marital boundaries spell restriction. But if you're a wise spouse, marital boundaries spell stability, growth, and protection. None of us would live in a house without walls, because we recognize you can't have any privacy, you can't have any protection from that which is outside, and so walls are a good thing. Well, the marriage needs to be the same way. Think about the Old Testament. There's a city called Jerusalem. It's called the Holy City. What was its greatest strength next to the temple? The walls. Fast forward to Revelation chapter 21. There's a place called New Jerusalem. Take some time and read how much detail God puts into describing those walls. The foundations, the colors, the precious stones, the magnificent height, the thickness of those walls. You say, what are those walls for? Protection, stability, strength. Walls are not restrictive to a couple inside the home. Walls are restrictive to the threats outside of the home. And there are many threats to the marriages in this world today. And so when we build a marriage, we need to build it with boundaries. Boundaries that touch our careers. Boundaries that touch our time. Boundaries that touch our extended family. Boundaries that touch our friends. Boundaries that address our finances, our ambitions, our hobbies. Boundaries that address our coworkers and entertainment. Boundaries regarding our health. Boundaries regarding our morality, and the list goes on and on. There are to be boundaries in a marriage for it to work. And so let us build a house with a foundation and then some walls. Turn to Proverbs chapter 24. Proverbs chapter 24. My favorite element of building a marriage for this topic today are windows. Windows. Now you can build a house without windows. I don't know who would do that. Because a house without windows will lack life. A house without windows will lack light. A house without windows will lack the fresh breeze of outside life. A house without windows will lack the glorious sound of the birds and the chirping of the crickets. And so too, a marriage without windows will lack light, and it will lack the incoming breeze of outside life. You say, what are you talking about? You need to have windows in your marriage where you can look out and see other couples. You need to be able to look out and observe other couples, both good and bad. You need to be able to see other relationships, not to judge them in any way, but to learn from them. Not to compare yourself, because we know comparing ourselves among ourselves is not wise, but again, to get an example from other couples. I have been highlighting or trying to highlight couples that have been married for a long time. Why am I doing that? I'm setting them up as examples. I'm hoping that younger couples will look at them and say, how in the world did they put up with him for 60 years? How in the world did she deal with him or he deal with her for that long? They must be doing something right. There are lessons to learn by watching other couples. There are also lessons to learn by watching failing couples. You know, you don't like the way she treats him. Well, are you treating your husband that way? Never. Are you sure? It gives us a chance to assess other relationships, look at our own, and do some evaluation. I think windows in a marriage can help us learn the easy way. The best way to learn, in my opinion, is not by experience. You ever hear that? Experience is the best teacher. It might be the most effective teacher. It is not the best teacher. I ask a child who's being disciplined. Well, you're learning by experience. Yeah, it's not fun. The second child has the best opportunity. Watch the older kid get, disciplined and not do that. Proverbs 24 teaches us that observation is the best education. Verse 30, Proverbs chapter 24, Solomon writes, I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, look, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Verse 32, then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. And he concluded, verse 33, yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. Solomon says, I learned by watching the slothful that it doesn't pay in the end. And so be diligent just by learning from somebody else's mistakes. Without windows in your marriage, you'll only be left with windows of fantasy. You say, what are windows of fantasy? All the screens in our life that Hollywood paints fantasy of what marriage and romance is supposed to be. It's not realistic. And if you look to Hollywood to compare your husband or look to Hollywood to compare your wife, you will be disappointed. Because your husband won't act like that and your wife won't look like that. Hollywood doesn't help your marriage. But you can look inside the walls of the church and find couples that, you know what? I want to be, you know who I want to be like? I want to be like Jack and Judy Farmer. I want to be giving my wife flowers on our 51st wedding anniversary. I want to be preparing to go to Hawaii for my 51st wedding anniversary. You know who I want to be like? I want to be like Dennis and Marilyn Tuttle. Dennis has her health mapped out, man. Every day he takes care of her. Every day he takes care of her. And it's tiring. It's frustrating at times. But he wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You see, there's people to look to that are far better for us than Hollywood. All right, Proverbs chapter 15. You need to have a door in your marriage. If you're going to build a marriage, you've got to have a foundation of commitment. You've got to have walls, boundaries. You've got to have windows that you can observe other couples. And you need to have a door. Walls are critical for stability and protection. They help keep a house standing strong. They keep things out. But a house that only has walls and no doors keeps everything out. A door allows us to choose what comes in and what doesn't come in. It allows us to choose who is welcome and who is not welcome. There are plenty of people that don't belong in our marriages, and so we close the door. But there are also plenty of people that belong in our marriages, and we need to be able to open the door to them. Who are they? They're called counselors. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 22. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. Can I slip a word in there and reread it? Let's read it together again. Verse 22, without counsel, marriages are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, marriages are established. If you're the couple that needs no outside help, you've got all the answers, there's no problems, we don't need anybody's advice, we don't need anybody's input, we don't need anybody's assessment, then you're relying entirely on just your perspective and just your experience and just your knowledge. And it may be good, it may be a lot, but it can never be everything you need. And we need to be able to humble ourselves at times. And if the marriage is struggling or there's an issue we're not getting over and it's repeating year after year, decade after decade, you know what it's time to do? It's time to find somebody you trust. It's time to find somebody that has wisdom, and you sit down and humbly say, you know, we haven't been able to solve this problem. Can you help me? We do this with everything in our life but marriage. You know, guys at home, we're going to fix the plumbing problem, and we try everything. If we can't fix it, we call a plumber. We do this with our cars. We do this with a lot of problems. But our marriages, that'll fix itself. Or we're just okay living that way. But we need to be able to allow people with wisdom to come into our lives and help us. If you have a marriage that no one is allowed into, it's so private, it's so protected, it's so closed off to everyone else, you may be the exception, but rarely does that work. If you can find a good friend that you can trust, that both you and your spouse trust, it'll be good to say, hey, what do you see in our marriage? Are there any things I'm missing, looking at it from the outside? Or here's this problem. Am I wrong? Can I do something better? Oh, counsel is so important. Without counsel, marriage will be disappointing. All right, turn to Psalm 91. Psalm 91, you can put a foundation down. You can put walls up. You can put windows in those walls. You can put a door in those walls. But if you don't put a roof on what you've just built, would it not be a colossal waste of time? If you couldn't protect what you just worked on from the elements beyond your control, because you can't stop the rain, you can't stop the snow, you can't stop the sleet, especially if you live in Western New York, you'll get snow on April 29th. You need to put a roof on that will protect what you have invested into your home, to your house. In our marriages, we must put a covering on it that protects us from those things we cannot control. And that is, in my opinion, the hand of God. Ecclesiastes 2 and Ecclesiastes 9 tells us that there are unavoidable evils in this world. You can do everything right in your marriage, but there are still threats to your marriage. It may be sickness, it may be illness, it may be accidents, it may be evildoers, it may be criminals. You name it, there's a lot of things that we cannot protect our marriage from. And so we must rely on God to protect our marriages. We must look to God to put a covering over us and to help us. Psalm 91, this is a psalm that emphasizes and magnifies the protective power of God. Verse 1, the psalmist says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday." Building a house without a roof, as I have said, would be a waste of time. And building a marriage without inviting and trusting the hand of God covering you would equally be a waste of time. There are just too many things we cannot control, too many things we cannot impact, that we must rely on God to bless. And then I invite you to consider a chimney. You say, a chimney? That doesn't seem that important. It does when you realize hundreds of people die every year from carbon monoxide poisoning. Every home needs to have some type of heating source, and the gases and smoke created from heating sources in homes must get out of the home, or else the home becomes a death trap. There needs to be a place to ventilate, to force those gases out of a home. And so every marriage needs a chimney where harmful emotions and feelings can escape. Every marriage, because we are emotional beings, has its fair share of anger, its fair share of wrath, its fair share of frustration. Because we're sensitive beings, and in many cases insensitive to each other, every marriage has plenty of hurt in it. If you've been married for any length of time, you know that the people who hurt you the most sometimes are the people you love the most. It is our nature, unfortunately. Anger is a natural response to being hurt, but protected anger, sheltered anger, treasured anger, and ungoverned anger will destroy a marriage. Paul told the Romans, "Avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath." Let it go away. Give it a place to go away. You cannot harbor it. He told the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 4, "Be ye angry." That's okay. Be ye angry and sin not. And then he said, "Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." That is that is right at the heart of marriages. You cannot afford to go to bed angry with your spouse. Something happens overnight. You think, well, time will go away. Where do you think your dreams and nightmares come from? They come from us, from our unconscious thoughts. And if you let your mind continue to race with that anger inside of you, that's going to pose a problem. The next verse after Ephesians 4 that I just read there is, "Neither give ye place to the devil." Neither give ye place to the devil. There is something about sitting on anger overnight that's not good. Tell me, when does carbon monoxide do its greatest work? When we're sleeping. And yet here we have anger, which is likened unto this harmful poison. God's saying, don't you sleep with that in your bosom. Interesting verse in Ecclesiastes 7. Solomon says, "Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools." It stays there. It hangs out there. And that's somebody that's unfortunately foolish. So anger that stays in a home tonight will kill somebody in that home. And anger that stays in a marriage will kill a marriage. All right, moving on to the next one. It is a bedroom. Now, obviously, when you build a bedroom or a house, you want to be able to live in it, sleep in it, and so you often at least put one bedroom in it, sometimes multiple bedrooms, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms in a home. And naturally, every couple needs to rest, and a bedroom will do that. But for the sake of building a marriage, every couple needs to take the marriage bed seriously. Do not get uncomfortable, parents. I realize there are kids in here tonight, but as I have recently discussed with somebody, this is a topic we have to stop letting Hollywood discuss for us. I don't know why, but the church has said, well, we don't want to talk about that, and so we'll let the kids learn from school and from TV and the internet. That's a smart approach. No, we need to take this issue back. If you were at the marriage building banquet, Jan used the S word, and you could just see people like, even though we're all married and people have been married for a long time, we don't talk about that in church, so I won't talk about it. But I will say this. If you think this is a separate issue, you're fooling yourself, your marriage will hurt. When Paul in Hebrews 13 is addressing a bunch of different topics unrelated, he says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for some have been angels. And he's just mentioning a bunch of odd things, or different things, I should say. Out of the blue, he says in verse number 4, he says, marriage is honorable in all. Yeah, comma, and the bed undefiled. When Paul, who was not married, under the inspiration of God, mentioned marriage, he immediately mentioned the marriage bed. You say, why does he do that? Because he understands what so many of us don't understand. You cannot detach the physical relationship from a marriage. That's what makes a marriage different from every other relationship. You can be emotionally and spiritually close to anybody you want. But the one thing that marriage gives you is the exclusive right to be physically close to that person. Again, Hollywood has taken from us that exclusive right. Everybody's hopping into what used to be the marriage bed on the big screen. And so now we don't see it anymore as an exclusive blessing and right of marriage. We've lost the sanctity of it, the beauty of it. The entire book of the Bible, a book dedicated to getting souls closer to God, is given over to the marriage bedroom. It's called the Song of Solomon. When God brought the first two men, or the first man and woman together, he said they will be one soul. No, he didn't. He said they'd be one spirit. No, he didn't. He said they'd be one entity. No, he didn't. He said they'll be one flesh. You say, why? Because those are the only two people that should be able to have that. The marriage bed is more than a benefit. It is a responsibility. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, far too many marriages leave the marriage vulnerable to satanic temptation because they don't value this room in their house. Physical intimacy is an opportunity to cultivate and experience marital intimacy. I see the marriage bed as much more than a responsibility. I see it as an opportunity. Now, you can have coffee with your spouse every day and all day, and you should. That will build that relationship emotionally, spiritually. It will never build it physically. And so you should be involved in the coffee house. You should be involved in the bedroom and other places that will help enhance the physical relationship, because only physical intimacy in a marriage will bring total intimacy. Because only a marriage can offer spirit, soul, and body. I just think too many marriages, especially Christian marriages, who should know better, ignore the important role this room plays in overall marital health. For many reasons. I realize it's very complicated. I realize every couple is very unique, and there are a lot of problems associated with that. I just want to make sure you understand that this must be a part of your marriage if you're going to have a healthy marriage. All right, let's look at the prayer closet. If you're going to build a house, make sure you've got a good foundation. You've got walls, you've got windows, you've got a door, you've got chimney, you've got a roof, you've got a bedroom in it, and then make sure you build a prayer closet big enough for two. Make sure you've got your marriage ready and equipped to pray. I think marriage is under attack today. Do you think marriage is under attack today? No. Yeah, I think marriage is under attack today, but I also think it's been under attack since the day it was formed. You know why I think that? Because God loves marriage. If God loves marriage, that tells me Satan hates marriage. How did Satan get to Adam to cause him to consider sinning that would then bring a curse upon man, that would bring death in and bring all kinds of problems? What did Satan use to get Adam to consider the fruit? He didn't use education. He didn't use entertainment. He didn't use sports. He didn't use his job. What did he use? He used his spouse. He used his spouse. Isn't that interesting? That tells me that Satan is very interested in your marriage. Because he knows nothing impacts you like your marriage. Let's be honest, married couples. You can have a great day at work, a great day with friends, a great day with your own productivity, but all of a sudden your husband's not happy with you. Does that not influence you more than anything else? Now, ladies, maybe you're not going to admit to that. He doesn't impact me that much. Guys, you know it. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Right? So how do you think Satan is going to get to you? Marriage. That's his battleground. And so we need a prayer closet that we daily fall on our knees together individually and say, God, protect us. God, help us. God, guide us. God, move us. You know, I pray every day for my wife 3 things. I say, God, keep her holy, keep her healthy, keep her happy. Every day, God, keep her holy, keep her healthy, keep her happy. Because I know that she's a target, if for no other reason, because we're married, and now Satan has another person to get at one person. God can get to my wife through me. God can get to her through, or me through her. So we've got to be prayerful about it. There are many ways Satan can wage war against us, but there may be none more effective than through our spouses. So pray, pray, pray. Last but not least, you know what you need to build in your house? As long as you got one bedroom to live in and to be happy with, don't worry about the kitchen, don't worry about all the other stuff. You need to have a rec room. Turn to Genesis chapter 26 and we'll be done. Genesis chapter 26. There are a lot of other rooms we could elaborate on, and maybe someday we'll do that. But as you see, we've mentioned plenty of things for you to incorporate into building your marriage, constructing your relationship. But for a marriage to be healthy, there must be some recreation. So I encourage you, I urge you to have fun in your marriage. You need to budget money for fun in your marriage. Well, boy, that's not very spiritual, Pastor. Remember, this is not about spiritual oneness. It's about total oneness. Going to church, praying, worshiping, those are very important. They're a priority. They're just one part, though, of a marriage. You need to budget money to have fun. You need to budget time to have fun. Think about the word recreation. Recreation is recreation. It's recreating something. When you are recreating, you're recreating something that has life, something that has fun. You're doing something that brings life to you. Recreating, recreation. And so perhaps you've heard the saying, and I agree with it, couples that play together stay together. Look at verse number 1, Genesis chapter 26. Here's an Old Testament illustration, if you would, we can observe in another couple. It says in verse 1 of Genesis 26, "And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar." Verse number 7, jump down there, and it says, "The men of the place asked him, Isaac, of his wife. And he said, She is my sister. For he feared to say, She is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was a pretty little lady." Verse 8, "And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife." Now, I don't know, nor do you know, what they were doing. They were not playing basketball. They were not throwing the football to each other. We know that much. Most likely it was a very romantic, playful, affectionate encounter, to the point where the king says, "Brother and sister, eh?" Let's see what he says in verse 9. "And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife. How saidst thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die of her." Now here's the point. He went into Gerar saying, "These people will kill me for my wife because she's very good looking. So we're going to make a deal. You're going to be my sister, I'll be your brother." That's the story. And the Bible says when they had been there a long time, they couldn't hide their affection anymore. They were in the alley, apparently where the king could look out, and they were sporting. They were being playful. They were being romantic. They were having fun. This was not physical intimacy. This is them having fun and being playful. They had a healthy marriage. At this point, they had a healthy marriage. They could not contain their playful spirit. Couples that play together, they stay together. I think couples that laugh together grow together. Couples that laugh together grow together. I would urge you to take up hobbies together. Try new things together. It's fun. Do new things, something you've never done before. Go take lessons to ride horses together, to surf together. I don't care, but do something that would bring some life to your marriage. Recreation, recreate. Travel together. This is what my wife and I love to do. We love to explore new things together. We love to discover new things together. We love to set out and just see the world together if we can. Just have fun together. You know, dating is not something you do to get married. We call it dating. Dating is something we should be doing to stay married. When is the last time you went out on a date? Well, I see him every day. Exactly. Moldy, crusty marriage. Right? Well, it's just the way it is. That's how my parents were. You know, they just... No. You got to have fun to the day you die. Then your marriage will be worth living for every day. Couples that play together, stay together. So the question is, in light of this, is your marriage under construction? Are you working on putting these things into your marriage? Or did you get married and say, did it? This will be great. If your marriage is not under construction, it will be underperforming and ultimately unfulfilling. Keep working at it. Keep working at it for the rest of your life, and it may be everything you hoped it to be. Companionship is not created by routine. Companionship is created by effort, by work, and by building that relationship. Let's stand and have a word of prayer.